Well, hey guys, in today's video, I want to talk to you all about 5 common misconceptions when it comes to choosing skincare products. These are pitfalls that people run into when looking at ingredients, and you'll find a lot of blogs that perpetuate some of these ideas, and they're simply false. The first one is, well, water is like the first or second ingredient in this product, so I'm not gonna pay for that. Why would I just pay for something that's basically water? Like they're just watering down the ingredients. This is false. Water is necessary for a lot of ingredients to work optimally. Water also can help enhance penetration of some of the ingredients in the formula. Water, no matter where it falls in the ingredient list, also can play a role in the overall viscosity, fluidity of the formula, and that's going to impact how it spreads out on the skin surface and ultimately can facilitate even dispersion of those active ingredients across the skin surface and into the little nooks and crannies, because your skin is actually very 3D. It's not just a flat sheet. It's got nooks, it's got crannies, it's got crevices. Water in the formula also can influence its overall cosmetic acceptability and ease of use. Certain formulations, they rely on water to lead to a formula that is something that you can actually easily put on your skin. So if a product took away water or removed it, claiming that they have a more concentrated formula, you have to be careful of that, because you may end up with something that's just a clumpy, sticky, tacky mess that not only doesn't spread well on the skin, but that is just unpleasant to use and just completely ineffective. Water really can enhance permeability of ingredients into the skin. Now, that's not to say that water is always a must-have in a product. One of my favorite skincare products is waterless, and that is plain petroleum jelly. All right, the second misconception that sort of falls along this line of looking at orders of ingredients in a formula, like reading the ingredient list and trying to figure out how good it's going to be, the product is going to be based on like the order in which ingredients appear. And a lot of people will assume that having an ingredient that they're interested in up higher in the ingredient list or labeled at a high percentage means that it is a better product, or that other products that list the ingredient lower in the ingredient list, or maybe claim a lower percentage strength on their front label, that they are less than. And that's also not true, because first of all, higher percentages do not necessarily equate to more efficacious. There is a limit, so going higher doesn't necessarily get you better results, and in a lot of cases, a higher percentage is actually a lot more irritating. Now, when it comes to skincare products, there's so much out there, there's so much variability, and a lot of times brands are not going to disclose to you what the percentage of their active ingredients is. That's, of course, to protect their proprietary formulation, but also they don't want consumers to feel like their product is not as good as another brand with a higher percentage. And I don't fault them for that, because a lot of times higher is not really better. Take, for example, niacinamide, one of my absolute favorite ingredients in skincare products. It's great for redness, hyperpigmentation, the moisture barrier. It has anti-aging effects, anti-yellowing. The benefits go on and on and on. As a matter of fact, I feel like I mentioned niacinamide in like 95% of my videos. It really is a good ingredient. However, a lot of people out there find that it irritates their skin, burns, stings, they don't get along well with it. And for many people, part of that is that some brands put a very high percentage of niacinamide into their products. And we know that the effective strengths of niacinamide, maximum for 5%. But a lot of brands are doing 10, 20% niacinamide. It's not illegal to do that, but is it any better for you? Is it actually getting into your skin at those higher percentages, or is it just kind of sitting on the skin surface and now causing you irritation and is just completely unnecessary? The other thing about percentage of active ingredients that, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is a better product, is that the formulation overall is actually a lot more important in influencing how an ingredient performs. And we know this from prescription topical medications, for example, azelaic acid. acid. Azelaic acid is a prescription medication. Of course, it's also available in cosmetics as well. But with prescription azelaic acid, you have 15% and 20%. The 15% is in a gel, and you might think, oh, that is not going to be as effective as 20%, but it's actually the opposite. The 15%, they're both equally effective, but the 15% actually gets into the skin much better than the 20%. It's because the overall formulation of that gel allows for better penetration of azelaic acid into the skin in comparison to the 20%. The other thing that people don't take into account, like if you're just reading the order in which ingredients appear on a label, that you can really be misled, is that the ingredient may be formulated in such a way that a much lower percentage is actually needed to deliver the same results as a higher percentage. Take, for example, benzoyl peroxide. You know, benzoyl peroxide is an over-the-counter acne treatment, and it is notoriously drying and irritating, especially at higher percentages. But over the years, there have been advancements in benzoyl peroxide formulations. We have something now called micronization. Basically, the benzoyl peroxide particles have been made smaller, and so you can get away with using less. And those smaller particles, what happens is they do a better job dispersing on the skin surface and localizing in the pore. So you don't need as much benzoyl peroxide, and it's a lot less irritating. It's an advancement in benzoyl peroxide formulation. But if you just go into the drugstore and you see, you know, like, oh, 10% benzoyl peroxide gel is $3, but this more expensive 2.5% benzoyl peroxide treatment is, you know, $15. Why would you pay more for less benzoyl peroxide? I get what you're saying, but truthfully, you may find that the 2.5% micronized benzoyl peroxide is not only easier to tolerate and equally as effective, but you're a lot more likely to stay consistent using it because it's not so drying and irritating in comparison to the higher percentage. So don't fall for the higher percentage is necessarily better. Now, this is something that has been a myth for a long time. I've seen it on blogs, on social media posts. A lot of it has died down, but it still persists in a lot of people's minds. And that is the myth that jar packaging is not ideal, that you should have something in an airless pump or one of those dropper bottles, especially when you're thinking about ingredients like retinol that are not, you know, necessarily stable, require advanced formulations. These ingredients are susceptible to degradation upon exposure to light, air. And so, you know, in theory, in your mind, yeah, it makes a lot of sense that a jar that you're opening over and over again, you're exposing the whole product, the majority of the product to air, to light, that is not, you know, that's not gonna have the longevity in comparison to like an airless pump. And this is a myth. Formulation can allow those ingredients to be stable and to tolerate the frequent opening and exposure to light and air. Say, for example, retinol. A lot of retinols in formulations, they are encapsulated with a little like lipid shell that protects them from light and air, from degrading upon exposure to repeated light and air. For example, you know, the retinols that I've recommended in a lot of my videos from Neutrogena, they come in a jar package. But the formula is actually stable, and the brands test the formula to be stable in that type of packaging system. This is something that I learned firsthand actually when I toured the dermatology warehouse and their, you know, behind the scenes. I saw all the testing that they put products through in terms of packaging to ensure stability. And so it's definitely not, you know, as straightforward as like, oh, avoid packaging in jars. The other thing about products too that you have to keep in mind is that they have preservatives in them that also will help protect the formula from degradation upon exposure to light and air. So it's, again, the final formulation overall really influences not only penetration into the skin, efficacy, outcomes, but also product formulation stability. And so don't bypass products in jar packaging over those in airless pumps. It's not necessarily any better. I mean, I have no problem with any of these packaging systems. I actually prefer in many cases jar packaging, But I also do like an airless pump because you don't necessarily have to screw the cap back on. The thing about the airless pump though is that it can be hard to get those final last dregs of product out. And airless pump packaging is often opaque, so you can't really see or tell if you have anything left in there. It's kind of annoying, and for a consumer, you can feel like you're getting gypped, and frankly, sometimes you are. If you don't whack that airless pump against the back of your hand and try and get all that product to the corner so it can get sucked up in the pump, you end up wasting a lot of product, and you have no way of knowing that. So yeah, you have delivery systems like microencapsulation that not only stabilize the ingredient, but also optimize it for skin delivery, getting into the skin, as well as minimizing irritation. So myth number 4 is that don't waste your time on products with active ingredients that are low on the ingredient listing. Like anything that is, the last 2 or 3 ingredients on a formulation, it's too low to be meaningful. That is absolutely not true. Many skincare ingredients are most effective at very, very, very low percentages, less than 0.05%. So of course those ingredients are going to fall lower down on the ingredient list because you just don't need a lot of them. Retinol is an example of that. You don't need very much, and going higher just leads to more irritation. So you have to be careful in that regard, that simply having an ingredient up higher does not mean you're going to get better results. You're getting more of the ingredient. It could just be caking up on the surface of the skin and not actively getting in. It really does boil down to the formula overall and how that delivery system is formulated to allow for delivery of those ingredients. The other thing I want to point out too is that there are ingredients that enhance penetration of the active ingredients. Hyaluronic acid, for example, enhances penetration of ingredients. So that allows for a formula where you can end up with using less of the active ingredient and get, and sometimes better penetration with less of the active ingredient. And many prescription topical medications, for example, are very effective at percentages less than 0.05. Tretinoin, for example. And a lot of people, speaking of topical tretinoin and the percentages, a lot of people really do get hung up on this idea that, oh, I'm using 0.025% tretinoin, I've been using it for a while, so I must need to graduate to a higher percentage. In many cases, no. You really don't, because the end result, the outcome is the same, whether it be for improving the signs of skin aging or in many cases acne treatment, than what you're going to get from a higher percentage. Like, you're not going to get any more brownie points necessarily, but you can get a lot more irritation. And for people who have a deeper skin tone, as a reminder, that irritation can actually increase hyperpigmentation for you. And then for people who are pursuing tretinoin for anti-aging purposes, you can achieve that with a very low percentage of tretinoin. So don't necessarily assume that you need to graduate or go up in percentage. The reason to go up in percentage is, if you've been prescribed a lower percentage for, say, acne and you're not getting any response, then, going up may be indicated, because some people's acne is much thicker and they do actually benefit from a higher percentage of tretinoin formulation, a higher percentage tretinoin formulation. But that's not to say that everybody necessarily needs that, or that, you are required to graduate to a higher percentage. Speaking of percentage, the final mistake that a lot of people make, and it makes sense that, that this would happen because it's just not intuitive, is specifically as it relates to hydroxy acids. We already touched on the fact that higher percentage of an ingredient is not necessarily better. That definitely holds true with hydroxy acids. But one of the other things that you can be misled about when it comes to especially alpha hydroxy acids is thinking that, oh, I've been using this product. We'll just use this as an example. I've been using this product that has 10% glycolic acid. And, the economy is what it is. Inflation is just, and I want to buy something else that is a little bit more cost effective. So I'm going to buy this other brand that has 10% glycolic acid. You actually could get 2 entirely different outcomes. You could get the less expensive product could actually be more robust in terms of exfoliating, more intense, if you will, or it could be it could be suboptimal because percentage glycolic acid is not equal, if that makes sense. So a 10% glycolic acid from one brand is not going to be the same necessarily as a 10% glycolic acid product from another brand. And the reason for this is that not only does the final formulation really matter, but specifically the pH of the products influences their exfoliating by virtue of the free acid value tremendously. So you have to keep that in mind. And again, this is the kind of thing that a lot of times brands are not going to be disclosing to you because, you know, they have to protect their proprietary formulation and the like from competitors. I understand that. So don't just assume that you can switch around different brands and be maintaining the same kind of outcome, same kind of course. You may get entirely different results. And again, the overall formulation, in addition to the pH, also influences to what extent you're going to see exfoliating from a product, and penetration of that free acid. For example, hyaluronic acid, we already touched on, is included in a lot of glycolic acid formulas. It's hydrating, may help cut down on dryness and irritation that comes about with the exfoliating aspect, but it also enhances penetration of glycolic acid into the skin. So for that reason, you could actually, have an 8% glycolic acid toner with hyaluronic acid that is more intense than a 10% glycolic acid toner without glycolic acid. And it's challenging because you as a consumer, there's not really a good way for you to tell how different hydroxy acid toners are going to compare, or products in general are going to compare to one another, other than just trying it out yourself. But I say all that because, a lot of people make that mistake. They'll go with a different brand of their hydroxy acid product and they find that they're getting, a lot more irritation, dryness. And, the tricky thing too, I think sometimes brands actually will tweak their formulas. So it could be a product that you've actually been using for a long time, and then maybe they tweak the formula around and all of a sudden it's, in the case of a glycolic acid toner, for example, it's, maybe penetrating the skin a little bit more intensely, and you're suddenly getting a lot more irritated and dry and you can't figure out, like, you haven't really changed anything, but the brand may have changed the formula around a little bit. In my time alone on YouTube, there have been many products that I talk about, review, and the brands have, tweaked the formulas around, oftentimes for the better, but it's something to keep in mind, especially, if you're someone who has sensitivities to certain ingredients, you're allergic to them. All right, guys, so those are 5 misconceptions regarding skincare formulation and, choosing skincare products that I see, kind of perpetuated a lot on blogs, social media posts, and questions that I get a fair amount. So I hope this video was helpful to you all. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.